Welcome and good morning once again. Welcome to Open Your Eyes. We are about to venture off into our first segment for the morning, and sargassum task force update. We've got the folks in to tell us all about it. As a matter of fact, we've got John M. Burgos, who is the executive director of BTIA, and Abil Castanedas, who is the chief tourism officer, Ministry of Tourism and Civil Aviation. Guys, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
It's nice to have you in, and the topic at B is definitely something we want to expand on. Reason being is because coastal Belize, sargassum, the scent, the look, it's not what we want. So let's jump on into it, the task force, and how has it been in terms of the updates?
Well, I guess if I can get it started. The task force has been already existing for about a few years now, since I think 2016. It was initially started when the first major influx came in into the country, if you remember that time. It sort of went a little bit dormant because in 2017 we really didn't see much sargassum coming into our shores, and then 2018 you had another hit. 2019 we're there again. Forecasting for the region is at an all-time high this year. There are certain parts of the Caribbean region that are actually being hit way more than we're currently being hit. The currents have been favorable for us here in Belize. But with sargassum, there's so much that still remains unknown. It's not a weed, it's not a leaf, it's an algae. And it is natural to the environment. It's not like it's something new. We have been seeing sargassum from ever since. It's just the quantities that is coming in makes it very difficult for us to be able to clean it off the beaches. And when it stays on the beaches, that's where the problem starts. As you mentioned, the stench, the smell that comes off when it's decaying is what really creates the main impact, not only for tourism, but for many other sectors within the destinations.
Now, you're right. The Sargassum Task Force was put together to kind of find a collaborative solution or to look at what can be done to address the problem. But I want to ask, what type of collaboration do you have beyond Belize's borders? Because this is a Caribbean issue, and I know that a lot of the source or the indication as to the source is that it's South America, near South America as well. So what's the collaboration taking place in terms of understanding it for the region and also addressing where the source of the problem is?
When it started really in earnest in around 2014, 2015, what started was a huge growth in research being done in the region by universities, by scientists to really understand what this is and what sargassum really needs in terms of its growth. Because still, even though I'm sure if you read literature, you'll find that they're saying it's the heat or the temperature of the waters and the nutrients coming off of the cloud dusts coming off the African continent that's really fueling the massive growth of this algae within our region. It's still very unknown. These are just theories. We have been working along with the Sargassum Task Force in looking at what other countries and what other destinations have been doing. In particular, we have been have very close communications with our Mexican partners. In fact, later this evening, myself and also Minister Figueroa will be going to Mexico to join a high-level meeting of regional governments on the sargassum issue to see what we can do together, building forecasting systems and all of that. Really, the trend is moving towards dealing with sargassum as the same way we deal with hurricanes, and not so much as being a one-and-off situation, because again, the projections, while they're still very maybe not completely accurate or specific or detailed, they are showing that sargassum is here to stay for the foreseeable future. So it's going to be an annual event that all of our destinations across the Caribbean will have to be dealing with.
And what has been the impact so far in the tourism industry?
Well, from 2015, when we really had the high volumes of sargassum coming into the country, one of the first reactions from the tourists was that, this is not what I came for. So we know that at least from our members in Placencia, in San Pedro, there were some cancellations. People were saying, they come in, and then, of course, you have the hydrogen and sulfur, which is what is generated after it begins to decompose after 3 or 4 days. It's very upsetting.
It is.
It irritates your breathing, your eyes, your skin. You have jewelry. It's gonna get damaged. So I can tell you firsthand. The first time I went in 2017, last year when I went there, they had a huge problem in San Pedro. And as I came off the plane from Tropicare, you smell it.
Yeah.
And
that's not even beachfront.
I had not had breakfast yet. So let me tell you, I stayed, my stomach was also 3 days.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
after I came back. And I said, how can the residents there
Yeah.
live in that condition? Because the stench, you imagine, Tropicare airstrip
Yeah.
compared to where the coast is,
Yeah.
no? So we know, and it also creates issues with the erosion. Your beach, it disrupts the natural flow of the waves, of the currents.
Yes.
So it prevents from sand to be taken in and taken out. So once the sargassum begins to accumulate, you begin to lose beach. If you look at some of the areas in San Pedro, they have lost a
losing
lot of
beach.
beach. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't think about
also
that,
in Kikakar, the same issue.
But you know, I'm glad that you touch on the health aspect of it, because we've got some beautiful coastal villages, beautiful coastal towns, and they might not know what happens when you go in the water. Sargassum is there. What happens when this gas is being let out? So tell us about the health risks of sargassum.
Well, I know that the UBERI and the Department of the Environment were conducting an initiative, and they did an initial research that it showed that one of the first things that the hydrogen sulfide does on the sargassum is that it eliminates the amount of oxygen in the water. So all the living creatures in the water die. So you normally saw when you see the 100 feet of sargassum in front of you, you're going to see a lot of fish on top of it because they literally suffocate to death. You know? And in terms of the people, we know that it creates a lot of rashes. Some people get dizzy, upset stomach. We don't know more prolonged impacts on human health, but we do know that there's impact. I mean, if you look at hydrogen sulfide and the impacts it has, it all depends on the quantities. So that you get exposure to. So that's one of the advisories that we do is if you see that it has the molds, don't go in the water. I've seen kids running, swimming right through the sargassum. And then they go into their little kayaks and go into the water, which I say they shouldn't, because you don't know how their body is going to react.
But also, Placencia, if I'm not mistaken, Placencia took the initiative of digging a hole and then burying. Is it recommendable that we do this?
No.
No.
So part of it is that when the sargassum, what John mentioned, it's true that the sargassum does create some dynamics that makes the beach management, natural beach management, a little bit difficult. That's further impacted if we're using these large excavators and backhoes, which we saw in last year in Placencia and I think in some of our islands. And what they do is that they dig trenches and then put the sargassum inside and then cover it back with sand. That has been shown to create even more detriment to the beach, creating more erosion. And so what we decided at the task force is that one of the first guidelines we started to put to be able to recommend to our properties on the beach is that don't use these heavy machineries. In our programs that we have for incentives for duty exemptions and that type of thing, we also are not promoting the use of heavy machineries. In Mexico, again, learning from them, we have learned a lot of what not to do. Similarly, they are moving away from using these heavy machineries. They're also moving away from the use of another thing that was very popular last year and earlier this year, the use of booms. So it's again,
which the sargassum broke through.
Which the sargassum broke through primarily because they're using booms that are used for oil spills, and also booms that are not necessarily built for that type of weight. I mean, when the sargassum mats, you see the mats, they can be miles wide and miles long. But really, the depth of it is what hurts us because they can be up to about 10 feet deep in some cases. So you imagine all that mass, and like John mentioned, they don't only come with sargassum. It comes with marine life, yes, but also sand. It comes with garbage, and so it really becomes a heavy task to clean it off the beaches.
So in the few years that the task force has been operating, and the people living and working in the coastal communities have been tackling this problem, what have been some of the viable solutions or options that people have taken so far?
So we have been looking at this for the past, 10 months now, specifically in terms of what's the best way. What have our properties and stakeholders been using that has been working, that not only minimizes the impact on the beach and marine life, but also allows for efficient and effective cleaning up of our beaches. And we have landed with one solution at this point, which is continuing the manual cleanup along with light machinery. We have donated, for instance, some tractors and trailers to the town councils and village councils to assist them in pickup.
Okay.
We have provided some financial support for them to hire work crews to be able to do campaigns of cleaning up the beaches when we do have a large amount of sargassum coming in. And again, we have also provided the protective suits for the cleanup crew to be able to protect themselves as best as possible, because even though there is some indication of what the health impacts are of sargassum on it's not proven.
Yeah, we don't
there are
know.
only correlations that can be made in terms of statistics. You have maybe a spike in rashes when there's a high level of sargassum coming in, but there's nothing that has been shown to prove that that is the actual source. So that's one of the lessons learned. What we have also learned in the case of booms, for instance, is unlike what a lot of our stakeholders were looking at earlier this year or last year, is that they're not efficient as barriers. Mexico is using booms, but they are using booms in terms of using them to divert and divert them to a particular point of the beach to then pick it up and collect it and dispose of it. And so as a diversion tool and technique, that is where the Sargassum Task Force, as we speak, is doing some assessments in San Pedro to see if we can this year begin a pilot program of using booms to do exactly that.
And what's their disposable method? What do they do to dispose of it?
Who? Mexico?
Mexico.
So just like us, they take it and they use it as fill. But there are alternative uses that are now being put together by the private sector in Mexico. Fertilizer is one of the #1 uses. The issue with fertilizers is that you do have to do the scientific studies to understand exactly what all is in the sargassum. There have been studies in the region that showed that there is some sargassum that comes in with heavy metals. And so that can provide its own sort of detriment if you're using it in the soils. So you do have to do the proper investigations. Other uses has been, in fact, I think about a month ago, we had a presentation from a gentleman that's building houses out of sargassum, creating bricks, mixing it with clay, and it actually has been successful. He's doing low-income housing in Mexico right now.
I've seen that.
And some other uses have been, using the material for composting, using it for even artisanal products that I know that they're using it in Mexico. People are trying to see what they can do with it because it's coming, but nothing substantial.
And it's so much in quantity that, even if you start making jewelry or bricks, it still isn't covering, isn't using all of the sargassum. But I have a question about the landfill, because one, how much space will you have to use it as landfill? And secondly, if we don't know the health impacts and it's underground, what future implications could we be facing?
Right.
Well, I mean, those are all questions that we really wonder. We really don't have answers. We do know that some of some property owners do a very good job of collecting it and having it in filling their land because they own a large property. What they have expressed to us, at least one in particular, I remember in Placencia, is that they have seen how grass grows. Where they throw the sargassum, there was no grass before. After the sargassum, you see the grass coming up. But that's a good sign. But you don't know what else is happening, what happens to the other components of the sargassum, the heavy metals and stuff that comes in. And then the other thing too is that once the volumes that you're using for landfill, you don't know what that turns into. You don't know what happened, what kind of seepage that is creating on the ground when the rain comes, because we know that this turns into hydrogen sulfide. And we have, in San Pedro, there's a property that had, bulks stacked over it. And the smell was horrific. So you know that it's something that's very living. So when you're dealing with something that is very alive, full of a lot of nutrients, you really have to study it. And I'm hoping that some of the universities conducting research are going to be able to provide us a little more insight into that. Because we really need to know. Because we're doing what we can right now, because sargassum is not going to wait for us,
It's a multiple step problem. One, it's when it's there, it's the removal, but then it's also what are you going to do with it for disposal? You spoke of moving away from heavy machinery to manual labor. But how realistic is this in the long term? I know one of the last things I read was that there is a massive influx of sargassum that some say will come to this area, some say they're not sure. But when you have a large amount of sargassum, as we saw last year,
Right. So long term, it's not necessarily the best way forward. So what we're looking is how do we blend technology, but smart technology, not just going directly to the big heavy machinery and technology that will destroy the same thing that we're trying to protect, which is our beach and our marine resources. But yes, it's that's why it has been such a arduous task to make a decision as to where the best approach is, or what the best approach is in terms of cleaning up of our beaches. But what we have learned, not only here but in the region, is there is a 48-hour period that we have. If we can remove the sargassum out of the waters and just put it on the beach, for instance, within 48 hours that it's landed, the impact of smell and all of that is much less. And so that's one of the, what John was mentioning is one of our properties in Placencia has really looked at it. I mean, our properties, they're not waiting. They have looked at, they are developing their own little systems and processes, which we're learning from also. They're taking it out of the water as it comes in, and they're just drying it out on the beaches until it dries out, picking it up. And they mentioned that there's almost little smell or no smell when they do that. And so our guidelines that we just launched a campaign on social media, and hopefully we're going to come to media also, is providing some do's and don'ts for the sector, for the public, what to do, what not to do, who to get in contact with, so that they understand these little tips that would really help a lot of our properties and our municipalities in being able to know what to do.
And you mentioned offering resources, because now you're talking about a full-time crew. I've been to properties where every morning before you wake up, people are out there cleaning the beach, and also have to do it in the evening sometimes as well. So that's a whole new staff.
Yeah, well, the private sector, initially when this problem became more real, one of the first things that they asked is, say, government doesn't have to fix the problem for us, but we want government to assist us in dealing with the problem. So late last year, the government of Belize, for a period of 4 months, they did offer some funding, $1.5 million, that was going to be diverted through the local governments for the cleaning up campaigns. And then the hotels were given some tax exemptions for that period of time to use that funding instead of giving it to the BTV, to use that for their cleaning up campaigns. And, you know, they felt the relief, they felt the support. Because these guys, they say, you know, my property, my guests cannot wait for government to come and fix this. I need to fix this, because if I don't do it, they won't come, or they won't stay. Because they had people coming in today, and by tomorrow
they want to leave.
Say, this is not what I came for. I'm out. You know, so right now, where we are right now is that we have submitted a new white paper to the ministry and to the BTV for them to consider extending those resources and that support, so that our private sector can be able to feel a little support and, you know, and relief in being able to manage the sargassum properly.
Now, you spoke of the guidelines that you're establishing as well. We know that some areas are already using heavy machinery. How are you going to intervene to stop these type of practices? Because I imagine it's the fastest way to deal with it. Dragging a backhoe across a beach, you get it done faster than having men or women go out there and picking it up manually.
Well, that's one good thing that the task force itself is so multidisciplinary, and we do have not only the BTIA but the BHA, the Belize Hotel Association, also on the task force, and they have been extremely helpful in getting information out to our properties and to our members, and to their members, sorry, in really understanding what are the best practices that we're recommending. That's one. Two, the coordination that's happening at the local level. While it was at the beginning, especially working with village councils, for instance, that are now in transition and all of that, in working with them to ensure that the practices are maintained and that they provide a seeing eye to what are the practices that are done. I mean, a lot of our communities are small communities, and when you do something, everybody knows, and that type of thing. So it really comes down to an ability of our stakeholders to be able to be responsible and also share the information. In the proposal that has been put together by the task force that John was mentioning, there's also what we found is that at the local level there is some challenges with coordination. And having somebody on the ground that would be really the technical person dealing with coordination on the ground, making sure that we understand what's happening and to move the players that need to be moved, etc. And so that's one of the recommendations that will be forwarded in advance in a few weeks to Cabinet, for instance, to see if they will be able to support the implementation of this coordinator of coastal management, I think we're calling it, to assist in exactly what you're saying in the monitoring and ensuring that the work that we are supporting is being done.
Yeah.
I think that fundamentally what we really would want is to have the one entity to be identified as the go-to entity that's going to address the sargassum.
Yeah.
We believe that NEMO is the best entity that has the structure, the expertise to be able to deal with that situation, emergency situation, because it is an emergency. Since they are the entity that already have the structure in place for hurricane. So, you know, this is not a hurricane, but it's an emergency.
It is an emergency.
It's something that we need to take seriously and we need to address it. So we believe that NEMO is the entity that should be able to manage whatever funding to do the cleaning up and whatever coordination and management. And they can have more direct, they already have communication with the local governments as well, because you know, once hurricane comes into, you have to have a very well coordinated machinery to help the people, removal, preparations, warnings, and so on. So we're looking to see how government is going to respond to what we're proposing, and we do hope that it's going to be much more sooner than later, because the problem is here on the summer.
It is.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, while right now you can only speak anecdotally of the implications on tourists, it is a very uncomfortable situation to wake up to the smell of sargassum, and you can't work 24 hours. But I just wanted to point out, there is a highlight in terms of our own progress here in Belize and what we've been doing, and I really wanted to take the opportunity to talk about it, and that is our forecast system that you're doing along with our good friends at the National Met Service. So tell me about this aspect of addressing the problem, and also how in leading this particular path for the rest of the region.
So in our strategies at the task force, one of it has to do with containment and collection and disposal, which we spoke about already. But we did find that forecasting and monitoring is fundamental.
Yeah.
That's what allows us to prepare and to plan when hurricanes come,
Yes.
for instance. So we have been working with not only the Met Office, with the Department of Civil Aviation, with their partner COSESNA. NEMO has been fundamental to this, developing this system, and also with one of our commercial airlines, Maya Island Air. What we found is that currently the forecast that is coming out of the Met Office, and I know that you asked this morning if there is, sometimes it's difficult because of the detail of the data that the satellites show. And that has been the challenge. So sometimes we get some good data depending on cloud cover and sometimes not. So what we're doing is that we do have a few models that the Met Office is using in terms of satellite information and imagery. We want to complement it with a ground truthing mechanism. Mexico is doing it using drones in some areas, but we also have I think the opportunity and the great thing that we have local airlines flying our airways on the coast every hour.
So they can track.
So we're working with Maya Island Air, for instance, and hopefully we'll be able to expand to all our flights within the region for the pilots to be our seeing eye on the coast. There's been a map grid that they'll only have to say the code of where the sargassum is seen on the map. They would radio that in directly into the Met Office. NEMO donated a radio, and that antenna system is being put up as we speak, so that the Met Office can use that information on a daily basis to complement what they're seeing on the satellite imagery and provide a much better and detailed forecast on a daily basis. So that because
right now it's only a couple of days that they do the forecast.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays, because of how the satellites move right now. But if we are able, when we get to this point, we will be able to provide Monday to Friday, and we will be able to provide a drift direction and also quantities by destination. So if San Pedro will be hit and Key Cocker not because there's a mat in front, that type of thing, we would be given at least a 24 to 48 hour window in which the municipalities and the properties can get ready. Because one of the issues and the reason why we really got into this is that the property was saying it's not a issue to get people to come and clean. The issue is to find those people because the labor is not necessarily available in some of these
not
destinations.
full-time, yeah.
It's not a full-time thing. So they do need a little lead time to be able to know, okay, today I will need maybe 2 guys,
Yeah.
tomorrow I'll need 8 guys, that type of
Yeah.
thing, so that they can plan on their own also.
And there's a difference between coordinating a cleanup crew for 10 feet versus 60
60
feet
feet, yeah,
of,
right,
of,
definitely.
of sargassum. Now, so that's the first step I see in terms of being able to have a forecast system in place. And then your second one I'm hearing is to coordinate with NEMO, hopefully, to be kind of your coordinating agency to get cleanups done. But how do you balance between public spaces and private spaces? Because some of the beaches are, shouldn't be sectioned off, but they are sectioned off or less accessible.
So one of the, it's part of the proposal that we have, that we're working on as we speak. What we learned in last year and the beginning of this year with what was done in terms of tax relief. Tax relief was given to all properties on the beachfront, no matter what. Some properties did their cleanup, some didn't. Municipalities, we did have some great experiences with working with a few municipalities, but some of them also, they were challenged in terms of human resources and the ability to really mobilize on the ground. And so the proposal now is to a little bit more balance, using lessons learned again, potentially making if we are going to be able to get a tax relief program back for the private properties, let it be a more specific area and really give the municipalities the support for them to be able to cover a larger amount, because you don't want to again get to the point where you're giving everybody tax relief and they're not, when you have properties that are not really
doing their part.
their part in cleaning up the beaches.
Or perhaps using zones, because some of
Exactly.
the properties are so close as
That's
well.
exactly what we're
Yeah.
thinking about.
I mean, there's so many dynamics that you have to take into consideration when dealing with this. So right now we still have a very learning stage of a learning curve to see how best we can manage the situation.
Yeah.
You know, there's some properties that if you walk San Pedro, Kikaka, there's some properties that are empty. There's some properties that are privately owned, fast residential area, and there's some properties that people are not there all year round. So they're not too aware of this sargassum situation. So if my hotel is next door to an empty property or to an empty property where the owner is absentee, it creates an issue because I'll be using the money to clean, but if he's not cleaning, I'm still getting affected. You know, and then all the other impacts to the environment still happening. So that's where we're trying to see how we can find that balance, where we can be more efficient in ensuring that the problem is resolved more consistently within specific zones where the sargassum is in high concentration.
Or probably we see a movement, especially for entrepreneurs, to move from the eastern side of the island to actually the western side that will not be populated with sargassum because it just passes through. I'm not sure if we're seeing this or people are actually, what are we seeing?
Other beaches.
Have you heard about the secret beach?
Yes, everybody, it's not secret anymore.
It's not so secret anymore, but the prosperity of that destination on the lagoon side of San Pedro is as a result. Not only of sargassum, but of other things, but is as a result in particular of the past 3 years or so of what we're seeing on our beaches. So yes, it's a natural adaptation that is occurring, and we can't say we can wait for that to be done so that all of our activities happen on the beach, because at the end of the day, if you go to San Pedro, what is marketed and sold is the beachfront with the reef. And so our, again, target is to make sure our beaches stay clean and that it is done with the least detriment to not only our locals, which is first and foremost, but also that the experience that our visitors have is at the best quality. I have to say that we have been lucky, as I mentioned earlier, that the currents have been favorable pretty much this year, even though our neighbors to the north have been hit hard. We just looked at some projections that they're dealing with. They're projecting about a 30% loss in tourism this summer. And other Eastern Caribbean countries are also being hit hard because of the currents.
And that's what I was going to ask. I mean, you know, we only know of what's happening in Belize, but when the task force looks at what's happening outside, that's a very important way to learn lessons and also see just how others are doing.
Right.
Are we, I mean, if you were to put together a spectrum, where are we in terms of the size of the problem that we have with sargassum?
So I'll give you
Good question.
2018.
Uh-huh.
I'll give you we have been studying Mexico because they're our closest ally and counterpart. We have been working with their team over there.
A huge difference in resources.
But a huge difference in resources and also in distance. I mean, they're dealing with 600 miles of coast. We're dealing with about 170. But just in comparison, last year, 2018, they picked up about 500,000 tons of sargassum.
Wow.
In about half of the 600 miles. We're projecting in Belize that we're at about 40 to 50,000 tons of sargassum. So again, the currents for the most part has been favorable. I mean, there will be the spikes that we get when we get sargassum all the way down to Punta Gorda. I was there a few weeks ago and some started to drift in when I was
we see it now
there.
in Belize City
We
too.
see it in Belize City. But it's difficult to say because the region itself doesn't have this monitoring and forecasting tool to see exactly how much. These are all estimates that are done based on how much is cleaned up and picked up. But we do know, for instance, even in going physically to Mexico, that what they're dealing with is substantially larger than what we're dealing with. The Eastern Caribbean, if you think about the Caribbean, that really serves as a boom in itself, unfortunately,
It's like a
because
sieve,
that's the first.
Yes, that's the first hit.
Yes. And there have been reports that resorts have had to close down. There have been reports that some of our Eastern Caribbean countries have declared complete national emergencies and have mobilized their versions of NEMO to deal with the situation.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
No, I've seen some islands where the mats look almost as big as the island themselves.
Right.
My goodness.
And so it shows that it is something that we are not the only ones that are struggling with. And that's why I asked very early on, what's the regional collaboration that's taking place? Because another one that is key, and I heard you mention it, is research. We have to understand more about the problem to know how we're going to address it. And we have a very unique environment in terms of our natural resources. So you said University of Belize's ERI unit is working on research. What are they looking into? What are you hoping to find out?
Well, to my knowledge, what they were looking at is they wanted to know what is the impact of the marine life, and they wanted to look at what is the impact on human life. Because one of the things that NEMO mentioned is that for them to determine it to be an emergency situation under their protocols is that human life have to be threatened.
Yeah.
You know, with hurricanes, well, you know, we can lose lives. So with sargassum, so we have to find the data to say that, you know what, their impacts, you know, you have to look at toddlers, kids, you know, age ranges, you know, how this really impacts them. Since it's seasonal, it kind of gives a challenge because you have, for you to measure the impact of something, you have to have it over an extended period of time. So you can see how over a period, you know, exposure to it for 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, how that's going to impact. So they're looking at those two key areas. They want to know the impact on the marine life because they have seen the fish deaths, and I mean, you find turtles, you find all that.
Last year we had 2 different fish kills, I remember.
Yeah, I mean, in San Pedro, southern San Pedro, it was huge.
Yeah.
And then big fish. It wasn't little fish. They were big fish that just on top of the sargassum.
Wow.
And you can see them all the way down. And then, you know, you have the sargassum decay. I know you have other living organisms decaying, so you're creating something even bigger. So that's where we're hoping to get some insight into what that research is really going to show. Because one of the things that Bill had mentioned is that the composition of sargassum for Belize is different than the composition of sargassum in other regions.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, we don't know why that is. You know, I think ours has a little bit more metals in it. So, you know, we don't know why that is, you know. So that's where the research really needs to focus and be able to share that information so that we better understand how this impacts us.
Yeah.
Which one of our coastal areas have been the worst affected?
San Pedro.
San Pedro?
Is this because
Is it where it is?
Location or?
Yeah.
San Pedro and in certain times of the year, because of how the wind and the water moves Placencia, because of how the geography of Placencia is a peninsula, it does get impacted. But San Pedro in particular, because the currents are a little bit more northern, just like when a hurricane comes, you do see a lot of them, or tropical storms, you see a lot of them going to the Gulf.
Yes.
Because of the currents. So the big bulk hits the Riviera Maya, the Cancun, the Playa del Carmen, Mahahual, etc. and we do get the residuals of that. So
Okay.
San Pedro does get the majority of the brunt as we speak.
And I'm sure because of the where our islands are situated, we've got tons of islands right in front of our country, which would be the first hit then. I'm not sure if this is the case in Mexico, for them to be getting all this sargassum.
No, Mexico. It's apart from Cozumel. It's all.
That's it.
It's
It's
all
open
a,
up.
It's all
Open.
an open
It's
hand
all
that's
online, yeah.
receiving it. And even Florida now, right now as we speak, the Florida Panhandle is getting hit on their eastern side very hard.
Okay.
Again, because of the northern
Yes.
flows.
Yeah.
All right.
And what about impact in terms of tourism experiences? Because cleaning the beaches is one thing, but I recall I was at Blue Hole maybe a year or two ago, and even trying to snorkel, it's
Yeah,
a problem because every time you come up, you're coming up to sargassum.
Well, since sargassum has been around for a while now, the tourists are aware, the travelers are aware of the situation. So what some of our members have expressed to us is that, you know what, they understand the problem, they understand the issue.
That's good.
But what they really want to see is efforts to deal with the problem.
Yeah.
They say, you know what, I understand, you know, it's a natural phenomenon that's taking place, you know, but they want to see you doing something. If you're just going to come to your property and they see this big dark cloud that
And the
everybody's
stench.
ignoring
Yeah.
and the stench, that's where it really impacts their decision to whether stay and to return. When they hear about the sargassum being present. So at least that's a plus. But in terms of how it's impacting more directly, we do know that along with other issues in the industry right now, it creates a problem. And I know people are having second thoughts of coming to Belize or not when there is sargassum.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And I mean, you're here from BTB and BTI, public and private sector. Just how concerned are you for the stability of the industry right now with things like sargassum? And we can't not ask you about the recent crimes that have taken place with tourists. I've been watching what's happening with the Dominican Republic, and they are severely being affected by an issue of crime. We've always said here that we're kind of lucky that or issues with tourists haven't gone as high profile as what we're seeing now with DR, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, no, it's a huge issue, and we have been fortunate and also unfortunate in that we had our own set of cases in the past,
Yes.
Yeah.
high-profile cases, which have had some negative impact on tourism. Anything that happens negative affects. This is tourism now, the
Yeah,
brand
it is.
equity of the destination.
Yes.
And people start to cancel and start to doubt whether they should come. Unfortunately, we haven't reached to the point where other destinations like the DR has reached. I mean, what's happening over there is so unfortunate, but for that to come and happen in Belize would be a huge issue. We would not even be talking about sargassum right now. We're
Yeah.
talking about something else.
Yeah.
For instance, in the DR, they are losing 10 to 15% right now in the summer just because of what is happening.
It's actually
for
rising too.
arrivals.
Yes.
And it's something that from a sort of disaster or emergency response is something that I know that the BTB has had a lot of work done in how to handle it. A lot of it is about information. Even with the DR, we've seen that information flows to and from clients and the people that have been affected has not been as effective as they would like, and that is creating some of the issues. So the BTB does have a crisis management plan that gets into play, and it has already been, I believe, sort of put into play with the recent increase in crime. I know that later today they will have a forum with the Commissioner of Police, the Minister and the Mayor in San Pedro to really look at ways in which together with the local communities we can try to see what we can do in terms of crime in San Pedro. But it is something that any crime, it doesn't take 10, it takes one, really that becomes of major interest to us. And I have to say that with partnership with the private sector, the BTA did a similar forum a few months ago, I remember in San Pedro, that we have to together stay on top of it to make sure we are doing what we can.
All right.
Well, let me tell you, since the situation on Sunday, where there was collateral damage in terms of what happened to the tourists that goes on a fishing tour, one of the things that we need to realize is that how big fishing is in Belize. Sports fishing, fly fishing, is huge. That's what one of the number one attractions that a lot of tourists come to
Yes.
San Pedro and other coastal destinations. You know, that is the number one thing that they want to do. And
Yes.
and let me tell you, Belize has been blessed with some of the best flats, some of the best waters, and some of the management systems that we have the opportunity to provide a really exceptional experience. And most of those resorts that are focusing on fly fishing, they can tell you, I have repeat guests coming here for 10, 15 years because they love the experience that they have here in Belize. So no, you link that to safety and security, whereby when I go fishing, I don't know what's going to happen to me out there. And I mean, if you're out there in the middle of the sea with 5 persons on a boat, you're on your own. Yeah. You know, we can't really have a system where you can protect that. But what we as a private sector are really, really concerned right now is how the Ministry of Defense and the police department really sit down and look at it as a national problem.
Yeah.
Because this is not an overnight thing that happened.
Yeah.
This has been building up over a period of time.
Yeah.
So once you have something building up over a period of time, you have to get systems in place.
Yeah.
You have to get national policies. You have to get national strategies. You have to get those partnerships that are going to help you be more efficient, be more resourceful. I mean, we spoke with the minister a couple of years ago, the Minister of Defense. We met with the former Compol. We're looking forward to establish direct communication with the Compol Williams. He's going to be there tonight. I'll be going to San Pedro this evening because I want to see what the exchange is going to be all about. And, you know, but for us, for private sectors, individual people that have seen, you know, the armed robberies increase, the break-ins, and so on, say we are too small to not be able to efficiently manage our crime situation. You go into any neighborhood, you know who the criminal elements are. Why are we not being efficient at dealing with that? You know, there's a lot of issues, internal issues, that we need to look at and find solutions so that then that can yield into the safety and security for all. I mean, the tourist is one thing, you know, but our local people as well. You know, you had 2 individuals that lost their lives. I believe it could have been prevented. Especially what led to Sunday.
Knowing the circumstances.
You know, so right now we're really hoping that the government really looks at it seriously and really begin to fix some of the internal issues so that then you can then see the benefits and the results on the ground.
Are we still seeing crime as an issue for some of the tourists coming in, concerns of crime? Because you're right, this one incident is perhaps what we're talking about today, but there has been, I mean, we know of people on cruise ships who don't come out, who don't come aboard.
They're afraid to come out, yes.
Yeah, who don't come out of the tourist village or who don't leave the boat because there are concerns about crime. Are we still seeing that as an issue for people who are traveling to Belize?
It's still not an issue. I think that's the thing that's working in our favor. One of the reasons why a lot of tourists keep coming to Belize is because of word of mouth.
Yes.
They tell you, you know what, yes, there's crime in Belize, but one is concentrated in the south of Belize area.
Yes.
You know, there will be random crime against tourists. You know, you can't stop that random. That's anywhere you go in the world, and that's what we have been saying. You know, but when you see the spike in a specific area like San Pedro, it has to raise concerns because that's the #1 destination.
It is.
And you know, having the large volume of high-end resorts, hotels, and visitors coming to that area. But we're still a very safe area. So we still recommend that you exercise caution, the way you don't isolate yourself in the areas that you shouldn't be. You know, understand where you're going, you know.
Ask questions.
Try to have a good relation with the people that you're staying with the hotel, the tour guides, the tour operators. You know, and we do know that our tour operators and tour guides and hotels staff and so on do a very good job of sharing that information because that's the best thing you can do is just advise them. Please, you know, if you're going to go into town, we recommend that you come in by, you know, certain time. Or if there's an issue, here's a contact number that you can have. You know, and I have a system in place.
Just one final question before we wrap it up. Abel, we know that the U.S. has elevated our travel advisory to Tier 2, and so it means that you take extra precaution when you travel. What is done from a standpoint from the tourism sector to what needs to be done to take us back to tier 1, where there's no precaution at all?
Well, part of it is what John was speaking about, putting together ways in which we can show that we're doing something to deal with the spike in crime.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's massive opportunities. I do have to say that the new Compol has been very proactive in meeting with the Belize Tourism Board, in which BTIA, BHA sit on, and they have been putting together certain strategies. But I think situations like what occurred over the weekend goes beyond police. We're talking about Coast Guard, and we're really talking about a security, more expanded security approach for tourism, and for locals, of course. That's one. I mean, you have to show that you're putting something together. Obviously, the statistics and showing that it's only a spike and then it comes down, that will naturally solve itself. But also, there's an element of lobbying that has to occur from the ministry, from the BTB, from private sector to the U.S. embassies. I do know that we have had similar situations with health epidemics, with the CDC in the United States declaring certain areas a no-visit zone and that type of thing. And through lobbying from the Caribbean Tourism Organization, for instance, they have been able to reduce the level of sanction that is placed within the Caribbean zone on certain things. So there will be an element of lobbying, but you cannot lobby unless you show that you're doing something to deal with the matter. So that's where we are.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being able to weigh in on that issue, and more importantly, for giving us so much details as to what's happening with the Sargassum Task Force. We understand that this is one of those issues where you're working to solve the problem as you learn to understand the problem. So we do wish you the best of luck, because we want to enjoy the beaches too. It's not just about tourism. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Yashe Conservation Trust to talk about their Maya Mountain North Forest Reserve. So stay tuned.